Good evening. I grew up singing the old gospel hymns, and so many of them reverberate still in my mind and in my spirit. Songs like "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Comin' for to Carry Me Home," and "This World Is Not My Home, I'm Just a Passin' Through." There is so much that is great in these songs. Inevitably, I learned theology from these hymns. And a key contrast that I heard in these and other hymns impacted my eschatology. That is, my view of what God would do in the future, what God was going to do for humanity in that final day. And the eschatological contrast I heard in many of these songs was between the here and now and the then and there. I learned that the here and now was not my true home. In fact, the ordinary stuff of life would be long gone when I arrived in that final destination in the then and there. That's what I learned from these songs. Songs like Angel Band, where the poet, anticipating the end of life, sings, "Oh, come, angel band, come and around me stand. Oh, carry me away on your snow-white wings to my immortal home." So here's my question. Would Matthew, Paul, and John have agreed? Did the New Testament authors buy this contrast? Did they have an eschatology that was about the then and there? To answer this question, I want to tweak the language I've been using just a bit. I've been using here and now, then and there. I'd like to suggest the language of the here and then. Might it be the case that the New Testament authors are not talking about flying away to an immortal home at the end of it all, but instead might be talking about what God is going to do in the here and then in this place? Here and then, I realize, kind of strange language, I grant you. Stay with me with it. Let's put it in conversation with Romans 8, a place where Paul talks about his own eschatology. Romans 8:18, we hear that Paul says, I consider our present sufferings not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Right away we could say, well, that kind of sounds a little bit like here and there contrast that you've been saying really isn't a part of the New Testament author's eschatology. Something like our present suffering here isn't worth comparing with the glory that we'll have in that final place there, far away, up in the immortal home, as the hymn says. But I'd like you to notice that Paul doesn't talk about here or there. He's not talking about location in these verses. And in the verses that follow, Paul gives us the picture that God is going to recreate all that is here. God is going to pursue recreation for what he has made and for humanity. So let's hear the rest of the passage. The creation longs in eager expectation, waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself might be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. And not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan as we eagerly wait for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Creation will be liberated, Paul says, and we will be redeemed, not just in our souls, but bodily. Paul's talking here not about a redemption from the body, but a redemption of the body. And this embodied existence sounds like here and then, not so much like then and there. Paul says something similar in Philippians 3, where he talks about Christ transforming our lowly bodies to be like his heavenly, glorious body. And it's not just Paul who talks like this. We hear in 2 Peter and we hear in Revelation the idea that God is going to make a new heavens and a new earth. Christians often stick the landing on the first part, new heaven, and don't quite know what to do with that second part, new earth. And yet the vision of Revelation 21, is of the heavenly sphere, the new Jerusalem, coming to be here in this place, not vice versa. And as that heavenly city comes to earth, we hear this exclamation in Revelation: "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them." Richard Middleton, a New Testament scholar, puts it this way: the vision of the scriptures is that a day is coming when bodies will be healed and human society will finally reflect the values, God's values of mercy and justice. And here's where you could get me going on and on. I mean, I could go on all day about this theme of the renewal of creation. You get any New Testament scholar talking about a rich biblical theme like this, and it's kind of dangerous, really, or at least time-consuming. But this is not a seminary classroom, and we don't have 2 or 3 hours to talk New Testament eschatology. So I'm going to ask a question that might be on the front burner for many of us, which is, what difference does it make? And what difference does it make for the topic of today, work, the topic we are discussing this evening? Does it make any difference? Does a here and then perspective make any difference for the here and now? I'd like to suggest that our understanding of what God is going to do in that final day makes a great deal of difference for how we live in the present. It makes a great deal of difference because it tells us something of what God values. If this world is not my home, I'm just a passing through, then the implication is that this world doesn't matter much to God. But if the end is about restoration, then God deeply values creation and human existence, body and soul. And then we are on this path toward restoration, toward human flourishing, toward creational flourishing. And so what we do in the body, what we do in our daily life, what we do in our ordinary existence to promote human flourishing, to be a part of the recreation work of God, this really matters. Let me ask you to take a moment and think about your today. What did you do in this day? What was your experience of life? The people you interacted with? The work that you did? And what does what we're talking about, how might it impact how we think about what might have been just another ordinary day? I remember a time in my life when I had a really keen sense of the ordinariness of life. It was 1997, and I was doing my PhD work as the mother of preschoolers. In fact, I was primary parent to Kate and Libby, the cutest girls in the world, 3 and 5. And I spent my days straddling really 2 worlds. In one, I was thinking complex thoughts and writing complex sentences for my professors. And then the other, I was speaking in mostly monosyllables to my daughters, because that's really all you need to do when you have preschoolers. They don't require complex sentences. That was my ordinary life. That was my vocation. And I remember feeling the ordinariness of it. And to be quite frank, I remember feeling a bit stuck. In light of God's restoration plans, we might need to reconsider how we think about the ordinary. Because if the end is about restoration, then our embodied lives matter. If God is going to renew all things, then our work matters to God. Our callings to create, to restore, to produce, these all matter. Our play matters. Rest might even matter. What we do in daily, maybe ordinary ways to bring about, in whatever way we're called to, God's kingdom, it matters. What we do Monday through Saturday and not just on Sunday, that matters too, because all spheres of life matter to God. And in light of this, the ordinary might not be quite so ordinary. As I conclude, I'd like to return to the Apostle Paul and to a phrase that Paul uses that, in a sense, sums up what we've been talking about when we talk about the here and then and what God is going to do. And the phrase is kaine katesis. You really didn't think we're going to get through this whole thing with no Greek, right? So, kaine katesis. Would you say that with me? Kaine katesis. New creation. Paul uses this phrase twice in his letters, and he uses it to talk about the reality that has already begun for those who trust and follow Jesus. In 2 Corinthians, he writes, if anyone is in the Messiah, kaine katesis. And in Galatians, we hear, neither circumcision or uncircumcision is anything. Instead, kaine katesis, new creation. What I'm so fascinated with in Paul's use of this phrase, these two lines, is that Paul gives us what we might call dangling sentences. There is no explicit verb in the kaine katesis part of these verses. Instead, he gives us this ellipsis. New creation, ... If anyone is in the Messiah, new creation, ... How do we fill in the blank? Traditionally rendered, if anyone is in the Messiah, that person is a new creation? Sure, that's good. Maybe if anyone is in the Messiah, their new creation has begun? Or just if anyone is in the Messiah, look, new creation. All of those are possible. He leaves us with this open-ended sentence. And in Galatians, where Paul has been so strenuously arguing that Gentile believers must not convert to Judaism, they must not be circumcised, his final words about circumcision are mind-blowing. Neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is anything. Instead, new creation, ... New creation is everything. New creation is the only thing that matters. So what can we learn from Paul and kaine katesis? Just this, that God's restoration of all things, God's plan for the here and then will most certainly happen. Because in Jesus, it has already begun. If anyone is in the Messiah, new creation has already begun to spring up. And in light of that reality, what we do in our daily work lives, in our ordinary existence, it's profoundly important. So back to 1997, back to that time when I was feeling the weight of the ordinariness of my life, I'd like to share with you a poem, a lyric that I wrote during this time. And I leave it with you as an invitation to potentially re-envision the ordinary in light of what God is already doing in the Messiah to renew all things. Ordinary day, nothing in the way of unusual, doing all the things I usually do, not so very wise, not so very spiritual, oh, so very usual is my life. But God was not afraid to come into this very usual world. Entering our lives, taking our humanity, oh, so very flesh and blood, the Savior's love. Eternal Word of God from all time existing, now to dwell among us eternally. You see, God was not afraid to come into this very usual world. Ordinary day, nothing in the way of unusual, doing all the things I usually do, but here in the mundane, reminded of reality, that God is in the usual, God with me. Thank you.